We're up to, we'll start from Kuf Am Beis. Kum len Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Kuf Aleph. Give a pause again. If somebody can pause themselves, can mute themselves. We'll give a pause again when we finish the daf before we begin the next daf. Okay, so we'll begin daf Kuf Am Beis with this Mishnah begins. So they have three categories of women. One is a mam'enes, a young girl that was married off by her siblings or by a mother. So she's only married midrabban. Hashniya is someone that is forbidden for you to marry. We're beginning from the Mishnah on Kuf Amud Beis. Hashniya is somebody who it's forbidden to marry, but only midrabban. Her grandmother and so on. The islandess. That's a woman who's barren who cannot bear children at all. Ein lahen ksuva. None of them are entitled to a ksuva. The mamenes, because she just walks out on you. So why should you give her a ksuva? The one you married that the Rabban is forbidden, we penalize her. And the one that was an islandess, because the whole thing was based on an error. You thought you can have children and you couldn't. And not only the ksuva but lepetus, nor the pedus. Rashi has two interpretations of lepetus. Either it means that you don't have to go ahead and take her out of captivity. Why? Because that's a condition of the ksuva, and since she forfeits a ksuva, nor do these three women, they don't have a ksuva, nor do they have pedus. Or it means if he ate from the nichsim maleg, the property that she brought into the marriage, and he gets a dividend, he doesn't have to reimburse her. He doesn't have to provide for them, not while he's around, but when he's not around, he doesn't have to provide for them. And v'lei beloyos. And we're talking about if the husband went overseas, and even though if just because she's my manager is a young girl, you have to feed her. But if you went overseas, he doesn't have to feed her. In other words, if she borrowed money while he went overseas, and then expecting that the husband will reimburse that person, and before the husband came back, she walked out on him, he doesn't have to pay. Beloyes. And now beloyes are clothing that she brought into the marriage that the husband decided to wear, and it rotted away with only shreds. He doesn't have to give it back to her. What do you call it? He knew that she was an islandess, then yesh lo ksuva. Then you didn't go on false pretext, false pretenses, so therefore, or ksuva. Almana, an almana to a kohen gadol. It's forbidden for a kohen gadol to marry a widow, or a grusha. It's forbidden for a kohen, ordinary kohen, to marry a divorcee, or a chalutza, or someone who went through chalutza, the kohen hedyet, or a mamzeres v'nesinah Yisrael, or a Yisrael is not allowed to marry a woman as a mamzeres, or from the nation of a sinim, or basis, or Jewish girl is not allowed to marry a sinim mamzer. In all these cases, yesh lehem ksuva. We don't take away the ksuva because we believe that the husband is the one who actually seduced her, and therefore he has to pay out the ksuva. Says the Gemara. Rav learned in our Mishnah when it says here that a mamenes does not have a ksuva, it doesn't only mean a girl who walked out on you. Even if you divorced her at the age of 10, you don't have to give her a ksuva. He learns Ktana Yaitza Beget, even if she was divorced with a divorce, you gave her a divorce, ain't look ksuva. You don't have to give her a ksuva. The Chosh came mamenes. Surely the case of mamenes where she walked out on you, of course not. And in other words, Rav says that a girl under bas mitzvah married by her brothers, even though they're married to Rabbanim, they're not really married. It's not really husband and wife. So you don't have to give her a ksuva. Shmuel says no. While they're married, it's like a regular husband and wife. You have all the obligations of a husband to a wife. It's only if she walks out. If she's memayin, then you don't have to. Shmuel Tani, mamenes ksuva. His version of the Mishnah was that only a mamenes has no ksuva. If you divorced her, yes, ksuva has a ksuva. But also Shmuel Tamei, Shmuel is consistent with you. Dama Shmuel said, mamenes ain't ksuva. Shmuel said that a mamenes has no ksuva, but a yoytze beget, if you divorced her, yesh lo ksuva, like any other wife, you have to pay out a ksuva. Mamenes loy postel mina achin, that if she walks out on you, they were never married in the first place, therefore she can marry your brothers. Loy postel mina kuna, she can marry a kohen. Yoytze beget, but if you divorced her underage, since the divorce is only midrabbanan, nevertheless you went through the machinations of a divorce, then postel mina achin, she cannot marry your brothers. Postel mina kahuna. And so too, she cannot marry a kohen. Mamenes, another law. A mamenes einat sich lahamtin shleisha chadashim. We generally say when a woman gets divorced, she needs to wait 3 months so that we can determine the child is whose child is it, the first husband or the second husband. And even though she's very young and there's no children, no prospect of having children, we don't make a distinction. But if she walks out, then as if she was never married. So why wait 3 months? But to beget, if she went through a divorce, then you need to wait 3 months, even though there's no likelihood of bearing a child. Says the Gemara of Micah Mashmal, and what's the Chiddush of Shmuel? Tanina, we learned all this in Mishnah, and that's true. Rav will learn that this Mishnah that we're about to quote argues with our Mishnah, but Shmuel is siding with that Mishnah. So what's Shmuel adding? Just as a Mishnah. Let him just say the halach is like that Mishnah. If anything, what do we learn? Tanina, we learn Kulu. We learned all of this. It says in Yavamis. How about men if she walks out on her husband, he's allowed to marry her relatives because they were never married. She's permitted in his relatives. She can marry a crane as well. But not again, if he gave a divorce, then who wants to be kreva? He's forbidden to marry her relatives. He has to be kreva. She can marry his relatives. No, because like an ordinary wife that you gave a divorce to. It's disqualified from kuna. So we're in the Kuf Aleph and Banal about 5 lines from the top. So what Shmuel adding that a girl under 12 years old, if you divorce, if you're married, you have all the laws of a husband and a wife, says so in the Mishnah. All Shmuel should have said is like Paskin, like this Mishnah in Yavamas. Says the Gemara, no, Shmuel does add something. This tzricha lahamtin gimel chadoshim itzrachle, the leitanan. This clause that if she went through a divorce, and even though she's young and underage and so on and so forth, she needs to wait 3 months. That is something novel that Shmuel added on. Says the Gemara, let us say that Shmuel is actually ketanoim. It's actually an argument of two tanoim, whether a girl under the age of 12, married by her siblings or by her mother, which there's no marriage there. The Rabbanan say they're actually like a married couple. It's an argument. Rabbanan says, whatever she does is meaningless. The husband has absolutely no rights and privileges over her, does not acquire her the findings, nor earnings. He cannot cancel her vows. Now, what do you mean cancel the vows? She's under bas mitzvah. She doesn't really have any vows. So Teresa says there's a thing that we learned already, and we'll learn again later in the Durham, that a girl under a year before, 11 years old, it's when she reached the time of the Durham, and the Durham then are meaningful. And in this case, the husband cannot annul them whatsoever. And yeah. And then Teresa says that there's an opinion that says that year, when she's 11 years old, her vows are considered mahatayra. Higia lo einis nedarim. So how can the husband who's only married with the Rabbanan annul those vows? Or a kohen. It says here a kohen can go to the funeral of his, let's say, 11-year-old wife, but mahatayra, they're not married. It's only with the Rabbanan that they're married. How can he go to the funeral? So when it comes to the vow, we say whenever she makes a vow, she's as if she's making, unless my husband agrees. When it comes to the funeral, we already had in Gemara Yavamis that none of her other relatives want to have anything to do with her, because whatever she has goes on to the husband. So therefore, she's like a meis mitzvah, and that is why he's allowed to attend the funeral, not because it's his wife, but because she's like a meis mitzvah. And he doesn't inherit of him. He does not metame close. The rule is is not his wife. But the only thing is that if they want to separate their ways, they want to part company, they have to go through a min. Rabbi Shua says, Ma sektane. Rabbi Shua says that my sektane klum. Yes, it is affected. The husband does take over her findings. We might see their earnings. If he wants to know in the Durham, he can. He inherits her. If he's a kohen, he goes to her funeral. The rule is they're considered man and wife. So what is Shmuel and Rav? It's the same argument. So the only thing is that you don't need a divorce. A mean is enough. Lema Rav the Amak Rabbi Lezer, Rav like Rabbi Lezer, that they're not really considered married, and Shmuel the Amak Rabbi Yeshua, and Shmuel Rabbi Yeshua that they are considered married. Saying what as follows. There's no argument. Rabbi Lezer definitely holds that there's no marriage there. The whole marriage is not a marriage. Keep pleading the argument of Rav and Shmuel is according to Rabbi Yeshua. Shmuel says, I follow Rabbi Yeshua. There's a marriage, and the only exception is that you can walk out with a me and she can walk out, doesn't need a divorce. The Rav says no. All Rabbi Shua says here is that all the entitlements that normally a husband has from her to her, in other words, from her, what he gets from her, that is that he can know the Dorim, he yashes and all that happens. Those privileges that come from him to her, that does not happen. That does not happen because they're not really married. So this time it's only one direction until she becomes bas mitzvah. So that's what they're arguing in. Then the Mishnah said, he doesn't get to keep, she doesn't get the beloyas. That means if she brought in clothing into, remember there's Tzoyim Barzel and there's Nichsim Malay. Nichsim Malay means plucked assets. These are assets that she brings into the marriage that remain hers. They are considered, Nichsim Malay are hers. But the husband then works on it. He gets the dividends, and the dividends he reinvests, buys more property, and he continues getting the dividends. That's Nichse Malay. Nichse Basil is considered the husband. She brings it into the marriage as dowry. It goes to the husband, and he fixes a price in the ksuva, and then at the end he returns it to her. And if it's more value now than what's written in ksuva, she has to compensate him for it. We actually had in Gemara Yevamos a whole discussion whether she can force him to give the item itself or just the equivalent value of the item. So Tzar Basil is his, Nichse Malay is hers. And here we're talking about she brought in some clothing, and instead of taking the clothes and selling it and buying property and then have dividends, he wore it. And we hold right now, we're going to learn right now, according to Rav Kahana, that wearing the clothing is not considered a dividend. He's using the principle, which means the husband really had no right to do it, but he did it anyway. So what happens at the end of the marriage? She's miyun, or she is an islandess, or she's a shneer. Does she take those clothes back or not? He's wearing them. Does she take it back or not? Rashi holds talking about regular clothes. Face the whole talking about, Rashi in other places is talking about generally clothes that shredded. Says the Gemara. You once told us in the name of Shmuel, but it was a very cryptic thing. We're trying to understand what exactly he said. He said the following. This is only talking about when we discuss nichsim malay, the plucked assets. But those assets which are like steel, isla, you do have to return it. So there's this difference between nichsim malay, which is her properties, versus tzoyim barzel, which are his properties. So nichsim malay she does not take back with her, but nichsim tzoyim barzel, if she walks out of the marriage, she takes it with her. What's going on here? How about a papa tried to understand. There are three cases in the Mishnah. We have the case of Miyun, she walks out by the age of 12. We have the case of Shnia, which Midrabanan forbidden, and it's an Avera living together, where they're both committing a sin equally. And then there's the islandess, which turned out that she could never have had children, and the whole marriage was based on an error. So which case are we talking about it here? That Nichse Malay she does not take out with her, but Nichse Tzar Barzel she does. So the Gemara says, I'm talking about the girl who walks out. If the Tzayim Barzel is still there, the asset she brought in, whether it's Nichsim Malay, whether it's Tzayim Barzel, it's hers. There's no marriage, you should take it back. And nobody should get penalized. No Aveda was done. Everything is legitimate. If there was nothing left, then she shouldn't be entitled to take anything back, because the husband, when he had the Tzayim Barzel, was totally legal because they were married. He was allowed to use it for himself, and even the nichse, and his argument is the only time I agreed to give it back to her is if I divorced her, but she walked out on me, so why should I give it back to her? And the same thing with nichse malak. Nichse malak, even though he should never have used those shirts to the clothing to wear it because they weren't really meant to be worn. But the fact of the matter is that, and unfortunately it's a little hard to understand exactly what Rashi's saying, but the fact of the matter is that he said, when I assumed when we got divorced, I will pay her back whatever it is that I did. But now that she walked out of me, I don't have to pay her back. That still needs a little bit of explanation, because at the end of the day, he had no right to do it. Anyway, then the Gemara continues. So it can't be we cannot see the difference between Nichse Tzar Barzel and Nichse Malay. Then we must be talking about the island, the case of the islands, the woman that couldn't bear any children. Again, same thing. If the clothing is still prevalent and around, then Idi. Both cases, Shakla, take her back with her. The Ida Lesnov, they disappeared. then if anything, it should be exactly the other way around. You said that Nichsim Malay she cannot take back with her, but Nichse Tzem Bazel she could. It should be the other way around. Because Tzem Bazel belongs to the husband and Nichsim Malay belongs to her. So if anything, Nichsim Malay the Beshusa Kaim is hers, Isla, she should take it back with her. But Nichse Tzem Bazel La Beshusa, it's not in her domain, rather his Kaim Lesla. She shouldn't be able to take back. Ella Ashnia. We're talking about the case of where both the husband and wife committed a sin, they're living in sin. Midrabbanan. So the Kansu Rabbanan, because the Isas the Rabbanan, people treat it lightly, therefore we penalize them. But we learned in the Mishnah, if it was an Amana to a Kohen Gadol, for example, where it's an Isa in the Torah, we don't penalize them. She's still entitled to the Ksuva, because generally mitzvahs in the Torah don't really need to be reinforced. But the Kansu Rabbanan, we cancel them both ways. Ledidah bedidei. That which she is entitled to take out, we're going to take away from her. So the Nichsim Malay, we're penalizing her, she has to leave it in the marriage. And the day, but we penalize him because he did the wrong thing, that which he should be able to retain. The Tzem Basil goes back to her. What else we glean from Rakana is that if she brings in clothing, that's principle. He has no right to wear it. He has no right to wear it until it rots, it shreds. If anything, it's principle. You have to invest it, sell it, and take that money, invest in property, and then the dividends he gets. But didn't we learn Rav Nachman said pay to have it, that it's actually dividends? Rav Nachman pleaded. Rav Nachman arguing the clothing that she brings in, if the husband wears it, that considered a dividend, or that's considered using the principle. And if it's using the principle, he shouldn't be doing it. Anyway, the Mishnah says, "Ein len ksuva," they forfeit the ksuva. I remember we learned before that there's also a thing called tosefes ksuva. We add to the ksuva, whatever it says in ksuva, we add more. So the question is, when these people, the Maya, she walks out of the marriage, she loses the ksuva. What about the extras that he added on? Only that which is hakot halacha avol tosefes yeshlen. But if any addition, she does receive. Tanya namehach, we actually learned. Noshim sha'omra chachamim. Those women that the rabbi said ein len ksuva, they have no ksuva. For example, hamam enes, v'chaveriseh, and all the cases which are similar to mama enes is what do you call it? Ein lehen monim aside. They don't get the halachic, the legal amount that they're supposed to receive. Avol tosefes yeshlen. But if you gave her extra as a gift, she's still entitled to all of that. Noshim Shamachama, those women that the Chama said that they forfeit their ksuva for a different reason, because we penalize them. That she did, she goes against Yiddishkeit, which we had. She gave her husband to eat food which wasn't given maisa, or she had relations with her husband saying that she was not a nida, turned out to be that she was a nida. And the Chavar and similar cases, for example, that she made vows all the time, or she had all of these defects. They forfeit the entire ksuva. Because over there we're punishing them, so therefore we forfeit even the gift. By Yitzas Mishum Shemra, the woman committed adultery and therefore they divorce. In that case, Noitelis Mashal Fanesh is totally entitled to her ksuva, B'yoytza, and she leaves the marriage. Misayela, we're supposed to Zinsa, just because that she committed adultery and we force them separate, you see the all those things which are in existence, she's entitled to take them with her. Tani Tanaka Nachman. We learned before Nachman Zinsa Nachman. We learned in the Braisa that on the it says the other way around, that if she committed adultery, she does forfeit all the clothing that she brought in to the marriage. I disagree. Why should the clothes be punished? It's her clothes. You go back to her. So to me, in fact, I would revise the Braisa and edit it. She does not forfeit her clothing that's in existence. This opinion, the original Braisa that said that she forfeits, is Rav Nachman's Tumah. It was correct what they told Rav Nachman, but that's the view of Rav Nachman's Timtah. He was known as Rav Nachman's Timtah because many of the anonymous Braisas were written by him. The Chachamim say that she committed adultery, she does not forfeit her existing her clothing. It says that if you knew from the outset that she was an islandess, that she's entitled to everything. And then it talks about Amanda Kohen Gadol. So the Mishnah doesn't tell us about Almana and a Kohen Gadol? What happens if he does it make a difference? No, by islandess, we said it's a big difference. If he knew she was an islandess and married her anyway, then she's entitled to everything. If he had no idea or he was told that she wasn't, turned out to be that she was, okay. So then the whole thing is based on an error. When it comes to Almana to Kohen Gadol, the Mishnah doesn't seem to make a distinction whether he was aware that she was an Almana, or and then nevertheless he decided to marry her, or whether he wasn't aware and it turned out to be she was. And maybe you can argue the whole thing was a mekach tos. Nobody told me that she was a widow, and maybe therefore the whole thing is based on an error and she should forfeit a ksuba. The Mishnah doesn't go into that. So we're going to have a little bit of argument here. It says, island is, when it comes to an island, is Isha ve'ena Isha. Sometimes she's considered a wife and sometimes she isn't. But Almana, when it comes to a widow, with a Kohen Gadol, Isha Gemura, regardless, she's always considered your wife. And he explains, island is Isha ve'ena Isha Hikiba, if you were aware that she was an islandess, yes, look, so you're tied to everything. Lo Hikiba, if you were not aware that she was an islandess, ain't look so. She's not entitled to ksuba. But Almana, when it comes to a widow, Isha Gemura. It's the Mishnah says clearly the widow does not forfeit her ksuba, she gets her ksuba. In this case, it makes no difference of whether you're aware or you weren't aware. It's completely your wife, bein hikaba, bein la hikaba, yes, ksuba. And the logic behind it is, when it comes to an island, most people, if they were aware that biologically they couldn't have any children, you probably wouldn't have proceeded with the marriage. But when it comes to doing an avera, a lot of people that fall in love with a woman, and even though you know that it's wrong, nevertheless, you can't help yourself and you go ahead. Just because we cannot assume that if he would have known that she was an almana, he wouldn't have gone ahead to the wedding. We could, and therefore the whole thing mekach tos. There were many people who, unfortunately, after they fell in love, they shouldn't have fallen in love in the first place. But after they fell in love, it's too late, and they will proceed with the marriage. So therefore, in all instances, she's entitled to ksuba. That's what.
Maybe you could say that the Kohen Gadol's got a bigger responsibility to check out whether she's an almana or not.
True. Okay. In the case of Kohen Gadol, you can say that, but then we have the case of the Kohen Hedged with the Grusha. What happened there? And you're right.
But the Kohen Gadol's the one who goes into the Kodesh Kadoshim.
No, but when the Gemara talks about Kohen Gadol, you could also be talking about the Kohen Hedged in the case of the divorcee. The Mishnah again there says that she gets the full ksuba. So you can ask the same question: what happens if he wasn't aware that she was a divorcee, and turned out to be she was? Can he say the whole thing was a mekach tos, and therefore I'm not giving her a ksuba? So Rav Huna says no. Rav Huna says where it's not a biological problem, it's more or the anatomy. It's more a halachic thing, which is only with the Rabbanon. That many people, once they find themselves in that circumstance, are going to be too weak to walk away. They're going to continue anyway. Even if they would have found out, they would have continued. So therefore, you cannot argue to mekach tos. That's what he's saying. But Rav Yehuda disagrees. Well, Yehuda disagrees. We'll soon see Rav Huna, by the way, halacha is not right. Rav Yehuda disagrees. He says, achazu isha ve'ein isha. No, even when it comes to an avera, if you would have known that she was a grusha, if you would have known that you almana, you definitely would not have proceeded. So you can argue to mekach tos, and you don't have to pay. Achazu isha ve'ein isha. Sometimes the wife isn't. He if he was aware, yes, l'ksuba, lo hikba l'ksuba. So Meisel asks a question. It says, he married her thinking that she was, let's say, an almana. He came, turned out to be she was an almana. Then yes, look ksuba. You knew she was an almana, you get a ksuba. So we can infer. Ha stomach. Let's say you were not aware. Nobody told you she was not an almana. You just weren't aware one way or another. Then ain't look ksuba. She does not entitled to ksuba. It seems like because there's a mekach tos, so the way you were misled. It seems like there is no ksuba here. So it's a question of Yehuda. Yehuda say when it comes to almana, makes no difference. He didn't know. She's always entitled to ksuba. So I think about a light. Your inference is not correct. Light tema, don't infer hastama, but if you wouldn't have known ain't look ksuba. Elema say the contrast is that, but if let's say he was told that she's not an almana, and when he came, but then you found out that she was an almana, then ain't look ksuba. That's the only time she forfeits it, when he was totally misled. So you want to ask a question. So what are you arguing now? But let's say stam, you didn't know one way or another. My isla. So you don't want to say yes, she's entitled to a ksuba, even though you can say it was a mekach tos. If you would have known, you wouldn't have done it. It's not an argument. Then ask your question. Why does the Brisa say the two extremes? Why does the Brisa just say? Why does the Brisa say that if he knew that she was an almana, turned out to be, that's when she's entitled to ksuba? Say bigger chiddush. Yes, like ksuba leshmina, according to you, say bigger chiddush. Stama, he had no idea one way or another, and say that so you can argue it might be a mekach toss. Nevertheless, she's entitled to ksuba, because maybe if you would have found out, you still would have proceeded. No, and then automatically we would know that if you knew that she's almana and you still went ahead, surely she's entitled to ksuba. But furthermore, Tony, look, the Braisa konsa biyadua. So Rav Huna said, Rav Huna said that by almana, Rav Huna is the one who said by almana makes no difference whether he knew or he didn't know. She's always entitled to ksuba. Not like Rav Yehuda says that almana is no different than idleness, and almana, if it's you didn't know, it's a mekatos. So first we have the question from this Braisa right here, and second of all, it says clearly in the Braisa. You married her when you knew she was an almana, and you found out it was almana. Yes, ksuba, she's entitled to ksuba. But konsa stam, if you married her without knowing anything, ain la ksuba, she does not have a ksuba. So to you to Rav Huna, it's a question of Rav Huna. Rav Huna said that if you didn't know, it's a mekartos, and if it's a mekartos, and so on and so forth. To kasha Rav Huna. Rav Huna masnisin say. Rav Huna made a mistake based on the Mishnah. And what is that? Who's sober? He thought, but the kamaflik be islandless. Look, kamaflik about our Mishnah says by an islandless. It depends if you know or you didn't know. And by Almana, the Mishnah doesn't make that difference. So he thought by Almana makes no difference. You knew, you didn't know. There's no mekatos. He thought even stam also. But it's not so. Kiktani lol Almana. Aplukta the islandless kai. When the Mishnah brings in Almana and the rest, it's a continuation of islandless and the same distinction. If you knew, then there's a ksuba. If you didn't know, there is no ksuba, because you can argue that there is a mekachtas. Hadn aloch Almana zaynis, and now we start the 12th page. And we'll continue talking about the alimony or whatever it is, that not the alimony, but the provisions that the deceased estate has to provide for his widow, and how long for, and the conditions that go with it. And remember, we learned that if she doesn't take her ksuba, she's entitled to continue to be provided for by the state. Does she have to live in the house? Does she go back to her own family? How's it work? Okay, so it says the Mishnah. If somebody marries a woman, and somebody marries a woman, and she had already a daughter. So this is his stepdaughter. And they made up between themselves. He promised that he will provide for his daughter 5 years. He has to keep his word. Okay. What happens? Nisaslach, in the middle they got divorced, and she married another person. She might have had more kids with this person. So now they're his daughters, not stepdaughter. And then she married somebody else, but she had an agreement with her first husband for 5 years. And now she married somebody else who, again, she makes an agreement that the second husband should take care of her stepdaughter. She made the same deal with him. She's very smart. For 5 years, take care of my daughter. And the second husband also can't rely on the first husband. He has to abide by his agreement and provide for this stepdaughter 5 years. And the first husband say, well, why should I provide for her? She's been taken care of by the second husband. If she comes into my house and she wants me to raise her, with pleasure, I'll take care of her. No, he can't say that. He needs to bring food to where the mother is. Likewise, both husbands, the present husband and the ex, shouldn't meet together and say, hey, what's going on here? We'll give double the amount of food that this stepdaughter needs. What's the point? We're doubling up. You can't get out of it, but you can't say, let's go 50-50. Both have to give the full amount, but one of them gives her food. The second husband gives her food because that's where she's living. And the first husband gives her an amount in money. Then what happened? Nisas, the stepdaughter grew up over the years, and she got married. Every husband is obligated to provide for his wife. So now she's getting fed by her husband, and she has two stepfathers who promised to take care of her for 5 years. So the stepfathers can't walk out of their agreement, their responsibility. They need to provide for her, but money. Meisud, both stepfathers died. Benoisei and the legitimate daughters, even the other daughters they had from this wife. Mezainis, we learned before, Mezainis, because it has no fixed amount, they only are able to collect from the existing assets. But the stepdaughter, she is entitled, they run out of assets, she can go to the purchasers who purchase properties after this arrangement and collect from them. Why? She's not there as an heir, she's there as there's a debt on the state. So therefore, to get out of this whole mess, if you're marrying someone with a stepdaughter, with a daughter, existing daughter already, and she wants these agreements, you should add a clause and say, they would write, I have no problem taking care of my new stepdaughter on the condition of proviso that we're still married. If we're divorced, when you move out, I'm not giving her a red cent. If somebody says to the friend, I owe you $100. Now, there's a big argument between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam how to learn this whole Gemara. Rashi learns we're talking about if a person says, I owe you $100 from the past. Those I am admitting to you about an existing loan. And then we can have this whole argument. And the Rabbeinu Tam learns, no. They're talking about I am obligating myself for no reason, but I am obligating myself to pay you $100. And the question is that obligation of obligation? Because what's going to be missing here is it's not a proper star. A proper star has to have two witnesses signing, witnessing whatever the event is. Here it's not a proper star. We do have a concept that if a person writes an IOU and he signs on the bottom, then it has the din of a star, but at least you can collect from his own assets. You cannot go to purchasers because how are they meant to know? But because it's sort of a bit discreet. But or if he writes on a piece of paper, Ksav Yoda, he writes I without signing, but he writes I and his full name, and he said, owe this money. Then again, you can collect from Bnei Chayrin, but not Meshabadim. And over here, we're going to be talking about that he didn't actually write a star, but he said it in front of the witnesses, as we'll see. But he didn't make a kinyan, didn't write really a proper star. So what happened? So according to Rashi, we're talking about a past loan, and according to Rabbi Tam, we're talking about creating a new loan. So I owe you $100. Let's analyze the case. What are we talking about? He turns to two people and says, I want you to witness my time in the Shlokish Potter. Why in the world would the Shlokish say I am part of the two witnesses? And he documented it, and he put the document in front of them. And he wrote, I owe $100. Then why shouldn't he be chayiv? Why would anybody say you're not chayiv? Why are you potter? If he did not say atamedai, if he did not say you're my witnesses, and it's not a proper document, then might have Rabbi Yechon chayiv. Then why in the world would your Rabbi Yechon say that you are chayiv? What's going on here? So he did not tell them that you are my witnesses, but. He says he put a document in front of us and it says I owe you. He didn't write his name, he just said I owe you. If he writes his full name, that's already a star. He did not write his full name, it just said I owe you money, and he did not sign. And that's where the argument is. Rabbi Yechon says, why? Even though he did not say to the witnesses, you are my witness, but since he gave this document, I owe you, in front of two people, it's as if he's saying to them, you are incorporated in my IOU, and it's a proper legal document. And the Shlaki says that I don't believe that this is considered a shtar because he didn't sign it, he didn't have witnesses sign it, he himself didn't sign it, he didn't put his name in there. Just having in front of witnesses does not give it the full legitimacy of a shtar. So now we're going to ask based on our Mishnah here. Tana, we learned in our Mishnah, Hanoi says Isha, somebody marries a woman who poske ima and makes up with him. That he makes up with his wife, that he's going to take care of his stepdaughter for 5 years. He's obligated to keep her, to keep this promise for 5 years. Now, what exactly is the case talking about here? Are we talking about a proper star where you wrote a document and had two witnesses sign? Then what do you need a mission to tell you? Anybody who makes a debt and he has two witnesses and sign a document, you're chayiv. What's going on here? So what's going on here? My love, aren't we talking about a case here? Ki Hai Gavla, we're talking about exactly this kind of case where he produced a document where it says, I will feed or provide for my stepdaughter for 5 years, but he gave it in front of two witnesses. And he did not make a transaction, didn't make a kinya chalipin, which is normal, nor did anybody sign. He didn't sign, the witnesses didn't sign, and that's what happened. And yet, and the Mishnah says that it's a valid star. Says Gemara, no, and not only is a valid star, she can go ahead and collect from the chasim mishabadim with this. Says Gemara, no, here's a different story altogether. We're going to learn that a chasim lekala, when the parents come in and they make up a whole thing. Normally, you have to make a transaction, a star, a kinyan. But when it comes to kedushin and tanoim, and the parents are very eager to have their son and daughter getting married to each other, and they make all these promises, the benefit, the pleasure that they have to see that their daughter and their son is getting married, whatever they say then is considered a transaction. It's considered as if it's a kinyan. So we say this is called a shtari psikta, star where they make up over there regarding getting married, the chas lekala. This happens at the time of the tanoim. This is what tanoim is all about, and the edim can sign. And the Edim actually can sign it. Even though they just said between each other, the Edim could document it and sign it. So what's the chiddush? The chiddush is there's no kinyan there. And this follows Rav Gidol. They make up. So how much are you giving for your son dowry? Kach v'kach. In those days, dowries are both ways, not just the parents of the kala, but the parents of the chas as well. How much are you giving to support your child? What are you giving for to your daughter? Kach v'kach. They went ahead, Vikichu, and they went ahead and did, as a result of that, they go ahead and he got engaged. And Vikonu, and the din is that as if there was a kinyan, even though they didn't make any kinyan whatsoever, there's a kinyan. Because hein hadvarim haniknin ba'amila. This is the only exception where you just said words and it has the full validity of a transaction. It's like a shchimura. We made a special rule there that when he says something, it's a full transaction. Same thing over here. Same thing over here. Why? Because they're so happy. And that's what our mission is talking about. So don't bring any proof from there regarding an ordinary star where a person says, I'm obligating it, there's no kinyan, no proper star,